Working as an FBI special agent was my dream job. My whistleblowing was apolitical and in the spirit of upholding my oath. Nonetheless, the FBI cynically elected to close ranks and attack the messenger.
The FBI will crush you. This government will crush you and your family if you try to expose the truth about things that they are doing that are wrong. We are all examples of that.
Joining us now are Steve Friend and Garrett O'Boyle. Thanks for joining us, fellas.
FBI whistleblowers Steve Friend and Garrett O'Boyle both join us now. Gentlemen, so glad to have you on the program. Thank you for your testimony.
We need more folks like you, and I'm sure more people are going to be from your background are going to be giving you guys more intel as you're sharing that with the rest of us. We can kind of see that this is becoming normal for them to be held accountable, because I think especially an institution that we pay their salaries, they need to be held accountable.
I think a lot of people do share our beliefs and convictions. I think they just aren't at the point that Steve and I and others have gotten to. They're too afraid.
Thank you so much for being a guest here on PBD Podcast.
Thanks for having us.
How big is that bloody flag that Steve's got? It's the stone wall of his house. Lots of love, guys. Thanks very much for joining us.
Steve Friend, Garrett O'Boyle, thank you for being with us this morning. More importantly, thank you for speaking out. We appreciate it.
You're in the information age, but facts are in short supply. Reject the noise, ask bold questions, and pursue the truth with FBI whistleblowers and founding suspendables Garrett O'Boyle and Steve Friend. This is the American Radicals Podcast.
It is the American Radicals Podcast. On a Tuesday, it's a brand new week, 10:30 here on the East Coast in this subarctic hellhole called Central Florida, where it was like 50 degrees this morning, had to wear long sleeves. I don't know, first world problems, folks. But we're glad to have you along with us here. Rumble.com/amradpod. If you haven't already, please smash the thumbs up and follow our channel. We are just so close to 5,000. And if you all tell a friend, we'll get to 10,000 tomorrow. So hope springs eternally. If you haven't already, subscribe to the audio format on iTunes, iHeart, Spotify, any of those streaming platforms where we're getting about 1,000 downloads per episode, hoping to grow there as well. Today, in this brand new week, we're going to be talking about anti-human behavior. There's a lot of rivalry going on between the sides. You might not like people of a different political strife, but my problem's with people who just are all out anti-human existence. So we'll talk about how the United Nations loves funding baby murder, how the Tesla bomber is identifying as a baby, and we're getting a quasi apology from the New York Times, maybe about coronavirus, because it always goes back to coronavirus, and then maybe a look at how people are actually spending their times in a very anti-human capacity. All that, a whole bunch more to get to today. We'll get to it in a second, but let's thank the sponsor for the day, and that is the OG sponsor, the True Earth Pharmacy. Go to trueearth.co. Trueearth.co is where you go. You do not need the M. Trueearth.co. Great collection there of different supplements that they have that can help all the different afflictions you might be suffering from, might have some inflammation. So check out the black turmeric or the turmeric trio. Maybe just having problems like relaxing. They got some CBD options there for you and for the pet, the fur baby in your life. Check that out as well. And then also the fertilizer options there. If you're growing a home garden, you got a homestead, really amazing options they have. And they've seen some incredible results, particularly with the new option they have, which is this squid extract. So look at them at trueearth.co, and you can also use our promo code to get 10% off. The promo code is AMRAD25 because it's 2025 and we're getting healthy and we're all into a homesteading and having a massive, massive yield in this spring. So AMRAD25 gets you the 10% discount. So without further ado, let's get to the show today with at GOB Actual Garrett O'Boyle. Hope it was a great weekend for you, my friend. Hope that you embrace those around you and that you are very pro-human, as we are wont to be on this program.
I certainly am, Steve. And as you know, yesterday was St. Patrick's Day. And although my Irish heritage has diminished over the centuries, somehow our last name has held true. So we claim our Irish heritage like any good Irish American, especially on St. Patrick's Day. And this year, I was blessed enough to spend last night with my brother and my cousin, who basically is like a brother to us. So it was a good time, filled up my cup, and always good to see them because I don't see them enough. So, yeah, it was a good way to, even though it was a Monday, it was a good way to end the weekend.
Every day is a Monday when
That's
you
right.
are an indefinitely suspended FBI agent. And did you know there's more Irish people in the United States than in Ireland? Fun,
Allegedly.
fun fact. uh, okay, let's get to it. I got a whole smorgasbord. I'm bringing you in cold because I know this is a subject that will hit you, and we'll get the oh boil over meter baby to explode today because there's a lot of behavior we're seeing around the political spectrum, the government spectrum, all across the fruited plains here. That just seems to be kind of anti-human when you take a step back. So I've got a couple coming from international affairs and intrigue, the United Nations. This is from the United Nations website itself, which is decrying the fact that they're not going to be getting some money from the United States, the USAID, which is now being kind of just shelved entirely, which is an objectively good thing. But the United Nations is very upset, and they're saying that the U.S. funding cuts confirmed ending life-saving support for women and girls. And you have to really dig deep here and understand the importance of language as it comes to them characterizing the nature of what they do at the United Nations with the United Nations Population Fund. Nothing nefarious there whatsoever. So, USAID grants were designated to provide critical maternal health care, coded language, protection from violence, rape treatment, and other life saving care in humanitarian settings. The UN agency partners with 150 countries to provide access to a wide range of sexual and reproductive health services. So 150 countries, Garrett, where they are funding with our money baby murder, right? That's coded language.
Indeed, it is, and let's zero it all out. That's the best thing we could do. I I mentioned my brother and my cousin. We were talking about some of this stuff last night. They're some of the only people in my life who pay attention, kind of like the crew that we've developed here on the American Radicals podcast, because you realize that this type of stuff does matter. And if we're not paying attention, not calling out the truth, not pointing to wasteful spending, not pointing to coded language, not pointing to lies, that it's only going to continue and get worse. What the hell are we sending so much money to all these foreign countries for? Can we start focusing on America? And while we're at it, let's start turning back some of the baby murder in our own within our own borders while we do it. Because it's bad enough that we're funding it in 150 other countries, but it's also bad enough that we're funding it here. Let's we, we need a clean slate. We got to start over, Steve.
Well, when it comes to this UN avenue, they're doing it. It's really dark because USAID, which sounds like US aid, right? And they are sending grants to the United Nations, so they're not directly funding it. They're just funding this international co-op that we have going on, which then goes, according to them and their website, they go to great countries where they're doing awesome work because you can see the fruits of their labor. Right? You shall know them by their fruits in Afghanistan, Chad, the Congo, Haiti, Sudan, Syria, and Ukraine. Those are the countries that they chose to highlight of look at all the good work we're doing at murdering the babies. Now, I did find some actual facts, which you will not see on the UN website, but we'll just throw it up there just so we know who we're talking about. They state that one of the facts regarding abortion is that, quote, women who are turned away from a desired abortion are more likely to experience long term consequences like poverty or burning in the fires of hell. Although the United Nations Population Fund denies supporting abortion and coerced sterilization, records indicate that they helped to bring about the one child policy in China. So, good work, United Nations, who is very, very pro human. And the second story, I think, really edifies that. It embodies the fact that the people who work for the United Nations only care about people. Because, look, maybe they're just deluded. Maybe they really do buy into the fact that murdering a child is your only way to prosperity, to moving up into the middle class because you live in Haiti and Chad, and that's the road map that has been laid out for you. Let's just give them all the grace in the world that they are not entitled to. So the people who are running things, you would think would be very pro-human, like this judge, a UN judge found guilty of forcing a young woman to
Oh,
work as a slave.
how about that?
Hmm. Hmm.
And she's a judge,
That's the
or
face of
was.
evil right there. Her name is Lydia Mugambe. She took advantage of her status over her victim by preventing her from holding down steady employment, forcing her to work as a maid and to provide free childcare. So, jurors in this case accepted the prosecutor's concept that Mugambe, who was studying for a law PhD at Oxford, she was in the UK, engaged in an illegal folly. I like their terms. Illegal folly with a Ugandan deputy high commissioner. This other guy, whose name is John Mugerwa, they conspired together. So basically, it was a corrupt deal between these two parties, people who are of high prominence and high power and authority. So she's a judge in for the UN, and then she makes this deal with this guy who is some sort of Ugandan deputy commissioner, like ambassador role. So prosecutors said that they participated in a very dishonest trade-off where the guy arranged for her to sponsor the slave, and then she got him out of legal action that he was facing. That so they made a very corrupt quid pro quo, as they
Yes.
shall say. They didn't name the enslaved woman, young lady there. I mean, I guess young adult, but basically put her into what I think is almost like a left wing argument that we hear for having secure borders in the United States. And that is the fact that you have illegal aliens coming and living in the shadows and basically existing on slave labor in order to pay off their debts to the coyotes, as well as just to survive and bring in an income. And because they're off the books, they kind of are at the mercy of their employer. Sounds like something very similar happened here, except this was actually government sponsored. Well, I mean, I guess it's kind of government sponsored in the United States anyway, as we just threw open the border.
This is peak because of course it's government. How often, Steve, do we have to mention tyranny? That's exactly what this is. It's precisely tyranny. You're a judge for the UN, and you're going to engage in this corrupt activity with one other party, and you're going to keep that person out of legal issues because you're a judge, and so you have massive authority to do that type of thing. Meanwhile, he's going to help you with your slave labor, and you're going to just suppress your slave in 2025, mind you. You're going to suppress your slave so she can't properly make a paycheck, get a job, whatever, and you're not going to pay her. It's going to be free childcare, and it is the epitome of arbitrary or despotic abuse of authority. In this case, I would say it's more despotic than arbitrary, but it's both. But it's a judge. This is where you really are going to get the boil over meter going, because how many examples across the world now at this point, because here's the UN, do we have to talk about and discuss for people to realize government is not your friend. We do not have a benevolent government, and I'm talking worldwide. We have a malevolent government who wants to suppress and destroy and elevate themselves and just keep everybody else down, because why? Well, their heart is wicked and evil, and they think they can get away with it. And how rare is it too for somebody like this to actually get caught and then tried, brought up on some type of charge? I don't think we are even scratching the surface at how corrupt and evil governments are. We get little bitty details here and there, little cases like this every now and then, whistleblowers getting retaliated every now and then for actually trying to do the right thing. And it's just full scope, across the board, corruption, evil, wickedness.
This is just nakedly corrupt.
Hmm.
These two individuals involved in this, and the collateral damage to them was the young lady who was the slave was the most egregious. But also you have somebody of high political prominence and maintaining government position, and they are getting out of some sort of jam up because they're like, obviously engaging in something. I don't think you would go to a judge, a UN judge, and say, "Hey, look, I'll allow you to engage in slavery if you could get this prosecutor off my back," because they've got the wrong guy.
Hmm.
All right. All right, let's take it back to more impactful on the home front. I don't know if you've been tracking on this. I imagine some people in the AmRad Pod audience are tracking on the fact that they're firebombing a lot of different Tesla dealerships all over the place. And I've been kind of weighing this in my mind about the value of making it domestic terrorism, because I get a little bit concerned whenever the government is the arbiter of what sorts of ideologies are constituting domestic terrorism. I mean, what are those that are on the list that we can check off that we can then charge? But I think it's pretty clear people are doing this for political reasons, to instill fear, to bring about some sort of change. But as always, the individuals engaging in this are perfect. So the New York Post reported on this one Tesla bomber who is identifying as a baby. His name, and so the Tesla bomber's name is Lucy Grace Nelson, and you've got a Grace in your family. Um, so Lucy Grace Nelson, also known as Justin Thomas Nelson,
What?
is a 42-year-old transgender terrorist. Look at Lucy right there. I
Oh
mean,
my
that is
goodness.
the face of evil. Who threw a Molotov cocktail at vehicles and spray painted Nazi cars at a Colorado Tesla dealership. He lives, so according to the New York Post, lives with her mother, because the New York Post does not accept the premise, or accepts the premise, but he lives with his mom due to emotional problems and
Whoa, you
calls
don't say.
himself a baby online. Federal authorities who have taken over the prosecution refuse to confirm whether Nelson is charged as a male or a female, despite requests by the Post to clarify. If our courts do not know what a woman is, how can we ever take any ruling seriously? I mean, I guess we shouldn't, because we have some judges saying that flying Tren de Aragua people who have been evicted and deported from the country, they have to turn them around and bring them back. I mean, I'm getting off subject here, but we're supposed to abide by a justice system that is driven by the truth.
Exactly. That's the critical piece, and that's exactly what I was thinking about as you were talking about this, and this guy that claims to be a baby and claims to be a woman. What at the basic tenets of our justice system, the core principle of our justice system is the truth. If our courts, who are supposed to be the arbiters of truth, the whole goal, we've talked about this before, a police officer can arrest somebody based off of probable cause. So they have a belief that is stronger than not, that based on their investigation. So it's not just a belief, it's based on the facts that they have gathered to get them to a threshold of determining if it's more probable than not that somebody committed a crime. So you make the arrest, you take them off to jail, you write them a citation, whatever, they get a court date. Now it's up to the court to determine as closely as possible the truth. Sometimes the court determines that there was no crime, or they come to some type of plea deal, some type of agreement. Yes, there are shades of gray here because we live in an imperfect world, it's an imperfect system. But if the court cannot even simply state the truth of, this is a male, he was born a male, so we call him a he, his given name is John, it's not Lucy, and they can't even get that piece right, what hope do you have that justice isn't going to lack in a litany of other ways? But hey, we live in 2025, and you can just be whatever you want, and the court is going to bend the knee to this false ideology as well.
What if John identifies as not guilty? Should the courts acknowledge that, right? Our theme of the day is anti-human. When you convict and sentence someone, they have rights. They have humanity. Their their liberties are curtailed somewhat, right? We put them in a box, in a cage, but there's a duty now of the government to care for that person. They have to give them 3 hots and a cot. They have to be kept safe. That we don't just like throw them in like they're in some El Salvador prison. They're not in this country, right? So when John says, "I'm a baby," does he get to go to juvenile detention? Or no, John is Lucy now, so he gets to go to the female prison. What about their humanity?
What about their rights, even as a prisoner? Because in our country, especially, even prisoners have rights still to some degree. Yes, they're limited. Some of them are taken away, they're behind bars, but you're going to put all of those people at risk then? Because I just playing this scenario out, most likely he's going to end up in the woman's lockup. And then now you're diminishing and limiting all of their rights that they have just as being a woman. When we set up our prison system in this country, we separated men and women for important reasons, especially the types of people that are going to prison. They're going to be more violent. They're going to be more sexually deviant. So we determined, hey, it's probably best to split them up because it's going to be an absolute S show if we don't. And there's going to be rape and murder and rape. All think of just in the male side of the house. Rape already happens there. You got men raping men. You don't think that's going to happen when you put a morally and sexually and spiritually deviant person who's a man? You don't think that's going to happen when you put him in with the women? Come on.
I mean, and that's really when you go to your darker self when you say it, and we all say it, right? And we all kind of think it. It's like when the pedophile, child rapist gets sentenced, we all say, yeah, he's gonna get his when he goes to prison. That's all of us basically giving a pass to rape on the inside of prison. I mean, I'm not crying too hard over the pederast who should probably be executed. Which
What's a
we'll get to a
pederast,
story
Walter?
on that. Someone who's not pedophiles are a younger preference. If you like the early teenagers, you're a pederast.
That's
It's
a Big
def
Lebowski quote. Well, we got our movie quote in for the day.
but sort of on this topic, let's go to this other one about the Thomas More Society, which is filing a lawsuit in Pennsylvania against the governor who probably wants to run for president, but probably won't win the Democrat nomination because his last name is Shapiro for obvious reasons. So this is from Thomas More Society. Pennsylvania parents are suing a school district because the governor wants to redefine sex in the state of Pennsylvania.
Of course he does.
The lawsuit was filed a couple weeks ago against the governor's office and the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission. Very, very pro-human. Thomas More Society attorneys are challenging the state's 2023 regulatory redefinition of sex, which expanded the definition to include gender identity and expression. It's the same story over and over again, right? Whatever you identify as is what you are in essence. So I guess back to Lucy, he can identify as not guilty. So by redefining sex to include fluid concepts such as gender identity, sexual orientation, and personal expression, the regulations erode long-standing norms like up till about 15 minutes ago that shape education, family life, public policy, and replacing biological reality with subjective interpretations. And what it eventually boils down to is kind of what we touched on with the prison context, but maybe take it out of the realm of people who are incarcerated. It's men being able to violate women's spaces or vice versa. I mean, like nobody ever mentions that one. They're like, we don't want the men in the women's spaces, and we don't. But I don't know about you. When we had the intern in my office who was a girl and then came in the next day and was a boy named Max, the intern was using our bathroom. I got a little stage fright when I walked in there and went up to the urinal.
Did she use the urinal? That'd be an interesting trick. But absolutely right. And you're right. We don't talk about this ever, but no, I don't want a woman who's pretending to be a man in the bathroom with me either. Part of it is we have this it's natural law. It's God's natural law is what it comes down to. And so yeah, that's why you get that stage fright. That's why you get that concern or that you get that bizarre feeling because you innately know that something is wrong here. That Max is not Max. Max is a girl, a woman, and now she's claiming to be a boy, and now she's coming in the bathroom by me. In my RA in Wichita, we had they were essentially unisex bathrooms in the office, and then out in the hallway there was male and female, whatever. But if I'm in the bathroom and one of the other guys on my squad comes in, I don't care. And sometimes I'm changing in there. We had a shower in there. I would shower after I'd work out sometimes there. And I don't want a woman. And we had an unwritten rule. If somebody's in there, you wouldn't even go in. Sure that if I was in the shower, somebody could have come in and used the bathroom. But even then, you just give people their space. And this is guys. It was men. We mostly. I had a female coworker at one point and a female boss at one point, but it would be totally unreasonable and bizarre for them to come into the bathroom and say, well, I'm a man now, so I can be in here. But no, we just got to accept what they're saying. And here again, you're talking about courts, really, because you've got the governor of Pennsylvania saying, no, we redefined what sex is. And now it takes a group like the Thomas More Society, who, by the way, does great work typically, and they're fighting issues like this. But why is this even an issue? And even though we're not at the end, Steve, I gotta put this in here. Isaiah 59, verse 14. Justice is turned back and righteousness stands far away, for truth has stumbled in the public squares and uprightness cannot enter. Truth is lacking, and he who departs from evil makes himself a prey. The Lord saw it, and it displeased him that there was no justice. Please, somebody explain to me how we are not living this right now. If you depart from evil, if you say women coming in the men's bathroom is wrong and weird and anti-natural law, or if you say men going in the women's bathroom, regardless of what they quote unquote identify as, because guess what, Steve? As much as I want to identify as a leprechaun, I'm not, because that would
Pot of
be,
gold would have come in handy recently, wouldn't it?
that's true. It would have.
Look, we're not misogynist. We're very pro-human. We don't want bad things to happen for both the ladies and for the guys. And I'm just reminded of standing and waiting for a search warrant for 10, 12 hours. And the intern was there for that. And the intern had been hired on full time at that point. Naturally, that's
Of
that's the way
course.
it works in federal
Got to meet
service.
their metrics.
So the intern, as we stood there for hours upon hours, it naturally devolves into the cafeteria, right? The ladies kind of all aggregate into their circle, and the dudes all aggregate into theirs. And the intern was kind of struggling, right? So the intern had to stand with us. And when after hours and hours and hours, guys, in a law enforcement context, it starts to devolve into maturity levels of conversation that is on par with seventh graders at best, right? Like pretty raunchy.
Very sophomoric.
That was a very, very uncomfortable person in that intern there. I
Mhm.
didn't want bad things for her.
No.
She did not belong in that circle. And along that lines, I'm just going to do this later, but let's just jump into it because we're talking about women in the infantry, and I think that you're probably a good source of information on this one, particularly because of your time in there. And I don't remember where the policy fell in overlapped with your time in the Army, but maybe you can bring us up to speed. But this is from Blaze. Feminism weakened our military. Now it's time to fix the damage. So it's an opinion piece, but it points out a couple of really good things here that I wasn't even aware of. So they refer to Jessica Lynch,
Mm.
2003 captivity, revealed in her authorized biography, I Am a Soldier 2. I Am a Soldier 2 is the name of the book. It shattered the romanticized narrative surrounding women in the military. In captivity, Jessica endured 3 hours of torture by several Iraqis, which included anal, sexual assault, and rape. Her spine was fractured, her arms shattered, multiple other bones were broken, and she suffered internal injuries. And she was actually grilled about why did you include this in the book, because it was going to deter females from joining. So 10 years later, 2013, the Obama administration officially lifted the ban on women serving in combat roles. In fact, women were already serving in combat when Obama initiated this major policy shift, even though Congress had not approved it. So they just kind of did the we're going to ask for forgiveness, not permission. The original policy only allowed women in combat roles if they met the same training standards as men. When they failed to do so, the Pentagon lowered the standards, weakening the military readiness and effectiveness. Um, I'm unapologetic. I don't care if you meet the physical standards. I don't want Jessica Lynch happening ever again.
Yeah, same. And for me, thankfully, I was out by the time this change occurred. But I do think back to my time in the infantry, even stateside, because you still are doing hard things. We just talked about the sophomoric humor that men divulge into when they're in their group and they're among peers, very similar in the infantry, often divulging into ways that are not safe to talk about here. But nobody was offended. If most people heard the jokes that an infantry platoon would hurl at one another, you would think every single one was a racist and a misogynist. Maybe some of them are, sure. I don't think any of the guys I ever spent time with were. But you got black guys, you got white guys, you got Mexican guys. Sometimes you even have we had a guy when I was in infantry basic training from Colombia, but he loved this country so much. He served in their military. Now he's serving in ours, and he was on the path to proper citizenship, and that was one of the things he wanted to do. And so, but then when you add the aspect, it again goes back to natural law. When you add women into the equation, it is natural for men to want to step into that protectorate role. That is a God-given trait. Yes, not all men have it, but by and large, that is the natural order of things. And that's what it divulges into. I think we talked about it here. Maybe we didn't, but there were a few women who graduated the Army's Ranger School, which is 60 some days of pretty rigorous, grueling training. Oftentimes, guys lose a ton of weight when they're there because they don't get a lot of meals and they're burning a ton of calories. And then it came out recently that I think it was Pete Hegseth who wanted to look into this a little bit, and then the records, they all got destroyed because the standard was lowered for women to pass some of these more rigorous and grueling challenges. And then I think I also talked about this here before too. When I was in Afghanistan, we were in a very remote location, and we did have a few women attached to our unit. We had two cooks who were women, and then we had one. She was like a SIGINT, a signals intelligence. That was what she did. And so typically her and her little squad, I think it was her and three guys and one interpreter. And they would basically sit and capture um, essentially walkie-talkie traffic from the Taliban, and then their translator would interpret that and give us whatever intel we might have needed from it. Well, for a while, she would often talk about how she's just as good as us, and she wants to go outside on patrol with us, and all this stuff. So eventually, I don't know, 6 8 months into the deployment, we say, all right, come on with us. And she has to bring some water and some food and extra batteries for her radio, and then she's got her other equipment to capture the SIGINT, and we go for a walk because that's what we did there. We walked just about everywhere. It was very rare for us to get aircraft to take us somewhere to infill us to for whatever reason. So we typically would walk, and we were going out to this police. It was basically a police checkpoint that we had built, and we had a forward operating base and a combat outpost. And I don't remember how many miles apart they were, but this police station was kind of in the middle ground. And I want to say that one way it was 12 or 14 miles just to get to that police checkpoint. And so our mission for the day was to head out to that checkpoint and do whatever, check in on the local police, and help do some local training, and mission set with them. Maybe go into some of the villages that were nearby, whatever. Well, we're maybe halfway there, and the air is what they call red because there's too much debris, sand up in the air, or a storm was coming in or whatever. So we get out to this checkpoint, and she's already struggling like bad, and had already slowed us down massively on the way out there. Well, we get out there, and then air is completely red, and typically they try to not have units outside the wire when the air is red, because then you're not going to get any aircraft support. So if you get into a tick, an Apache gunship's not going to be able to come and help you out because they can't fly. So we get out here. We're there for like, I don't know, just a couple hours, maybe 2 or 3 hours, and our platoon leader's like, "All right, we got to go back. We can't stay." I think we were planning on staying for a couple days, and so now we just wake everybody up who wasn't on guard, and we head back. And when we woke her up and said, "We got to go, like get your stuff," she started to cry, and we start to head back, and we didn't get back till the following morning, in large part because she was slowing us down so much. The noise discipline was gone because she was going through bouts of crying about just walking. We didn't even get into a firefight. And we so we're heading back. At some point she just divvies out her gear to other guys in our platoon. And so now they're carrying her stuff. And we get back, and to her credit, the next day she did say to a group of us, "I was wrong." and she was physically fit. But she was small, and just think of how we're built different. Our hips are made different. Our bone structure, our muscle content is all intentionally made different. God made us different on purpose. And I can only imagine what would have happened if we did get into some type of contact, but she never went out again. And so whenever I hear of women in combat roles, I always think of that story, because it has the potential to be extremely catastrophic. And for what? We shouldn't be sacrificing our women in war. It's bad enough when we sacrifice our men.
So that she could have some sort of personal achievement, some sort of self-fulfillment, which, look, I'll even grant that the female is the super freak who can do exactly what you're able to do, GOB, right?
Hmm.
Let's just grant that premise. It still affects mission readiness, because I would hope that if you and I were on that walk and we had contact with the enemy and I got hurt and was in a place where you couldn't access me, you would try. But if it was a woman, you know that you would throw all discipline aside, and dude upon dude would be sacrificed in order to
Hmm.
do that, because again, we're all kind of different. But why let that necessarily affect the social experiment that's gone on? Hopefully Pete Hegseth is serious about actually changing this again, because I think that the mission readiness has been sacrificed for far too long, and the military is about killing bad guys and breaking things and hurting feelings, and not sort of be about like your personal enrichment and your opportunity to explore the world, right? And we alluded to the prisoner thing, and then the pederasts and the pedophiles. I want to go over to this story and get your thoughts on it, particularly in the lines of like humanity and anti-humanity, and we're pushed for your opinion on what should happen for a sexual predator to get out of prison. What should they really be willing to do in order to do that? So this is from Oklahoma, and this rep's name is Fetgatter, which is a kind of a cool last name. Fetgatter passes a bill to protect the public from sexual predators. Now,
Don't we already have those?
yeah, but this is a little bit further. This is a House bill. It applies to people over 21 who have committed a sex crime against a minor under 13. So really, really egregious. If they want to be released on parole, the offenders must undergo a mental health evaluation regarding whether it is likely that they would commit related offenses. And that's very normal. I don't think we should give parole, but if they want to be granted parole, they have to do the mental health evaluation. If the mental health evaluation determines that the chemical castration would inhibit the likelihood of future offenses, the sex offender may be eligible to choose to undergo hormonal treatment. Basically, what this boils down to is if you want parole, you have to be chemically castrated in order to do that. And over the age of 60, it's only going to be given out to the older offenders. And on top of that, you are subject to testing, like random drug tests and random castration tests, where they come up and say, pee in a cup. I want to make sure the hormones are inside of you. Now, where does this break down for you being a civil liberties enthusiast? We'll say, if you do your time, should you be allowed out? Or is that offense that that person was convicted and sentenced of so egregious that we should just keep them locked up? Or if they're out, they've done their time, should they have some sort of commitment permanently? That's really where I wanted to take it.
Yeah, this is an interesting thought experiment because of how important civil liberties are. Yet, when it comes to a crime like this, I think I'm stuck in the camp of you don't get a second chance. I don't care what classes you went through or how many cups you peed in or what you're saying, because you could say all the right things while you're locked up in part to get out, just to go and repeat offend again. Sexual crime aside, recidivism rates are through the roof. Uh, if you're a, a a burglar or a robber, or I don't know, you name it, a domestic abuser, by and large, already those people are going to recidivate. They're going to do the crime again, or some other crime, or one that's analogous to it. When it comes to sexual deviancy, it's even worse. It's far worse, because there's I don't know if there's a chemical change in people's brains when they go down this road of sexual deviancy, especially when it comes to pedophilia and or even just CP, child porn stuff. But it's similar to a drug addict who, when they started taking heroin, it was just a little bit. But after years and years of it, they got to take more and more and more to chase that same type of feeling, that same type of high that they got off of just a little bit of heroin in the beginning. It's very similar with sexual deviance. And oftentimes they sit in prison just fantasizing about the next piece of deviancy they're going to be able to engage in. So they're chomping at the bit to get out. I think you got to leave them locked up. And also, are there some that have changed? Sure. And won't do that again? Yeah, I'm sure there are. And I'm sure there are examples of that out there too. Nonetheless, it's too bad of a crime in my opinion.
I almost equate this to the gun laws that we have on the books where we say, if you're a convicted felon and you are out, you don't have your gun rights restored to you. And I think that if you've done your time, you should have your citizenship restored to you. You should have your voting rights restored to you. You think should have your gun restored to you. And if that makes you uncomfortable letting that person have a firearm, then they shouldn't have been out of prison. We should just keep them in prison, right? That's really what it's about. Similarly, I don't think you should get out of prison. That way, we wouldn't have to have the conversation about injecting you with some sort of hormone that will castrate you, right?
Yeah, and then isn't there an Eighth Amendment issue there too? Even if the offender consents to that type of treatment, I think there's got to be. I know there's some Supreme Court case law out there about this castration issue. I'd have to look and pull it up, so I won't. But I recall learning that and reading that. I think that case was from a Fourth Amendment standpoint, but there's got to be some sort of Eighth Amendment tie-in here as well, because even if you consent to it, are we at a point? Which, by the way, I'm fine with castrating all of these people, chemically or otherwise,
Yeah,
because
wouldn't give it the qualifier of chemical. I'd be very much in favor of doing it actually
Mhm.
and without having any sort of anesthesia.
Yes, yes, I concur with this.
All right. So, Garrett, what does it always go back to?
COVID,
Let's
always,
go there
always COVID.
for the one of the greatest examples of anti-human behavior, which we're getting the quasi mea culpa 5 years later, just to buy back credibility, but they can't help it. These vile, vicious, Marxist, communist, anti-humanists. I'm going to add that qualifier from now on. This was making the rounds over the weekend. In light of the 5-year anniversary, because we're all about these arbitrary dates. So, opinion piece. We were badly misled about the event that changed our lives. This is a person in seek of amnesty, but they just can't help it. So, the background is in 2020, when people started speculating that a lab accident might have been the spark that started the COVID-19 pandemic, they were treated like kooks and cranks. Accurate and true. Many
Mhm.
public health officials and prominent scientists dismissed the idea as a conspiracy theory.
Of course they did.
We have since learned, however, that to promote the appearance of consensus, some officials and scientists hid or understated crucial facts. That's putting it mildly. They just lied. They misled at least one independent reporter, just one.
One.
They orchestrated campaigns of supposedly independent voices and even compared notes about how to hide their communications in order to keep the public from hearing the whole story. And this is where this person gives the game away, though, because after a fair trial, of course, I want nooses, but I don't think that this individual subscribes to that same belief. All right. It's hard to imagine how the attempt to squelch the legitimate debate might have started. Some of the loudest proponents of the lab leak theory weren't just earnestly making inquiries, they were acting in terrible faith, using the debate over pandemic origins to attack legitimate, beneficial science, to inflame public opinion, to get attention. For scientists and public health officials, circling the wagons and vilifying anyone who dared to dissent might have seemed like a reasonable defense strategy.
No, it didn't.
No
It's
regret at all.
dude.
This is why we cannot have amnesty. We cannot share a country with these people.
Right. And this is why we always talk about COVID still 5 years later, because we need to talk about it 5 years later and 10 and 15 and every arbitrary 5 year date and every one in between, because this is really doubling down. That's what this is right here. Saying Well, we had a reason to do it. Yeah, you know what the reason was? To keep the truth from you. That was the reason. And then to make the appeal to authority that it was science. Dr. Fauci is science. All of these people are science. No, they were hiding their evil actions and then cloaking it in their false masquerade of this authority that they think they have. I don't care if you're a scientist. I don't care if you're a doctor. I have a brain. I will take the information that you give, but I'm not going to just stop then. I'm going to take in all of the information. And even in the beginning of this, there was information coming out that would lead a reasonable person, whether they were a doctor, scientist, or something in between or not, to believe that the bat soup at the wet market and the pangolin was maybe not true because there was the highest level bio lab just across the street, pretty much. And maybe, just maybe, because things have leaked out of labs before or out of science experiments before, that just maybe it came from there. That seems like a plausible belief. And then when you add in how destructive the quote unquote authorities were to any mention of that, it would make a reasonable minded person again think, huh, why are they coming down so hard on those of us who even allude to the possibility that it could be coming from a lab? And as we've talked about here a few times now recently, you've got the FBI, the DOE, Germany, the United Kingdom, the CIA, all sorts of countries and agencies coming out saying, yeah, it's pretty we're pretty sure it came from the lab, but we didn't want to tell you back then because we were in the middle of a pandemic.
I'm trying to come up with an analogy in my mind that could maybe better uh, represent how absurd this premise is, where this author is saying that you could understand why they called you a kook and a crank because you were questioning their legitimacy, right? And this is gaslighting. This is basically what it is.
Mm-hmm.
This is the the husband who is stepping out on the wife, telling the wife, why are you insisting on looking through my phone? Why you have these questions? You're a conspiracy theorist that you would possibly come up with this because it's for your own good that you allow me to go and continue to step out on you because that creates the proper environment where I come home to this house and have it run the right way. Even though you know what I'm doing is fundamentally and objectively evil and against every sort of agreement that we have with our marriage, this is just the way that it has to operate because I have to be in control.
Mm-hmm. It got to a point too where we talked about it last week. The quote from Gulag Archipelago, where he says, "You know that they're lying. They know that they're lying. You know that they know that you know that they're lying," and goes on that thread. That's what this became, because we got to a point where I think most people, at least in my circles, and remember too, Steve, we were actively in the FBI at the time. So most of the people I was dealing with on a day to day basis were other FBI agents. And we all believed and would talk about it and discuss and say, yeah, it seems pretty likely that it came from the lab and that this type of suppression is not a good thing. But it's because we all knew that they were lying and they knew that we knew that they were lying, so they had to come down even harder.
It wasn't even the fact that there was a perception of some sort of authority and expertise so that if they called you a conspiracy theorist, well, then you were just painted with that brush and there was nothing you could do about it. There was actual institutional mechanisms they used to make you a conspiracy theorist. They
Hmm.
censored people on the internet, right?
Yep.
They caused people to lose their jobs. They wrecked entire relationships with people with the power that they had to do it because they just had to maintain their power in order to do it. The lie was always the point,
Hmm.
and it was a great test for them, and it was a way to measure the mettle of the American people, and we were found wanting in pretty high regard there. And that's a pretty heavy topic, but I wanted to kind of set this up for a little bit of a lighter one. But it's very anti-human, and it's in keeping with our thumbnail of the day, which is the statue of a chicken. So let's get some clarity on that one. Were you aware that there was like this battle between Cracker Barrel and Waffle House recently?
No, not
Now,
aware of it at all.
so one was criticizing the other. I believe it went, and if I'm wrong, folks, correct me in the chat or
This
in the
is this
comments.
this is funny because I wouldn't even consider those two to be the same type of genre of restaurant. I would have thought maybe Cracker Barrel and Cheddar's or something like that, and maybe Waffle House and IHOP. Even that I think is a stretch. I mean, Waffle House is like you go at
I
2
think the
a.m.
commonality might be that Cracker Barrel and Waffle House both sell breakfast food, and they're available at every single exit on the interstate. I mean, that would be the rivalry. But I believe Cracker Barrel kept their prices of eggs the same despite all of the hike in prices. And
Legit of
Wa-
you, Cracker
and
Barrel.
Waffle House gave like a 50-cent surcharge. And
Not
they
cool.
were open about it. They said, "Look, eggs are really expensive,
Fair.
cost of doing business." And then one was giving the other one a hard time about it. And because this is just a rivalry of good old fashioned American breakfast places to eat, naturally PETA had to weigh in because they're the most anti-human, because it is people for the ethical treatment of animals. They don't care about people. So this comes from PETA's own website. They decided to weigh in.
Thanks, PETA.
Absurd Waffle House Cracker Barrel egg feud prompts PETA to enter the chat. They wrote a third person version on their
Yeah.
own website. Okay.
Thanks. With
Hens pay the highest price according to PETA.
hens.
Okay. Right. Following a ridiculous feud between meat eateries, as they characterize them, Waffle House and Cracker Barrel over the former's 50-cent surcharge per egg, PETA has erected a sky-high message on Montgomery's east side, just a stone's throw from both chains, to remind everyone that it's actually hens in the egg industry who pay the highest price, their lives, and to urge everyone to try widely available delicious vegan eggs.
Oh my goodness. You know,
That's more anti-human than the New York Times talking about coronavirus.
I concur with this because oh PETA. I mean, if you want to eat vegan eggs, I'm not going to stop you, but it's the science. Hey, if you want to talk about science, the science is clear that actual eggs are a superfood. They've got all sorts of biotin and other I almost said ingredients, but it's a natural. It comes from chickens, so it's not really an ingredient, but it's got fat, it's got protein, it's got all these things that are good for you. So, but I won't stop you. I won't force you to eat an actual chicken egg. But PETA, I mean, why are you interjecting yourself here? You don't need to. You don't have to. But I think it's a good time to pull this up. Do you remember George W. Bush at his State of the Union many years ago now, Steve? But it's perfect. I had this up because I thought, okay, anti-human. There's going to be a time where I can insert this, and the time is now.
Send it.
Oh no, what did I do?
Maximize that
There we go.
screen.
Here we go. Maximize play.
Creating human animal hybrids, and buying, selling, or patenting human embryos. Creating or implanting embryos for experiments. Creating human animal hybrids, and buying.
I think that PETA wants to create human animal hybrids. They don't want you going to the eatery because I don't know, feelings. But for some reason that clip of George W. Bush saying creating human animal hybrids has stuck with me for the better part of 2 decades. So,
I mean, we were laughing about it because these people are just jerks who are making their, I don't know, you can't even say it's a secondary issue. I mean, it's tertiary, whatever's beyond that, not even registering on the radar as their first world highest priority. But they fundamentally disagree with you and I about, why does the world exist? The world exists for people to thrive. We're supposed to have dominion. And they view success as being that people don't interrupt the earth at all. They would actually prefer to humans to not exist, which
right.
is kind of contrary to their own existence. But
Yes, they can self-eject first.
that's right. You go first.
Yeah.
Prove how much you love the chickens
Yeah.
and kill yourself. I have this video, and for those listening, you're just going to have to jump over onto Rumble, or you can see us on X at X America News, which I was negligent about, derelict in my responsibilities as plugging before. It was one of the other places you can watch it. So we're around 55-minute mark here, and I have this video. And to me, it was a very anti-human indicator, and it's a chart. And we've done something similar like this before, and it's about how people spend their time in the last almost 100 years. It's a bar graph. So we'll throw it up, and you see that the different categories starting in 1932, it's family, school, friends, neighbors, church, bars and restaurants, college, coworkers, and online. And online, for very clear reasons, in 1932 is at 0.0. So this is about a 50-second video where you see the trends about how people spend their time, and you see how we are all kind of contributing to the fact that we're not really big about spending time with humans once the internet started to proliferate.
Wow.
It ends, so at the beginning of it, it was family at 22% was the high watermark. And online now in 2024, so 92 years hence, is almost 61% of how people spend their time.
Dude, that is
I mean, you're interacting with people, but are you
still,
really?
yeah. And hence here we are online. But don't diminish your online time if it means cutting out the American Radicals podcast.
No, that's right.
Cut something else. But
Look,
seeing that, it kind of plays a like a mind game on me just to see how all those things changed over time. But because it's so rapid, you live a year or you live a decade or more, and looking back, you can kind of point to some changes that you've seen over time. Like when I was a kid, the phone we had on the wall had a cord. My mom was stretching it to go in the bathroom or whatever, so we couldn't hear, or who knows what. And then it was a wireless, and then eventually cell phones, and even just look how cell phones have changed in the last 20 years or so. But to see that rapid graph, and just from 1932 or whatever to now, and to see how those things changed, and then when online started and how rapidly it succeeded to the top, or moved up the ranks and then just overtook everything by vast margins. That's about as anti-human as you can get, until you start getting Elon Musk plugging cyborg pieces into your brain, which would probably include some type of online mechanism. But dude, it's we got to pay attention to this stuff, because it's it's only going to keep degrading humanity further, especially if we're not aware of it.
the rapidity of which happened is just stunning, because families have been around for a long time, even
Mhm,
longer than the church, and
mhm.
neither one of those was getting to the 25% mark.
No.
And instead, now we're 60% online interactions. But like you said, you can do that. I can talk to Garrett. He lives in Wisconsin. I live in Florida. This is the great part. We're still
Yeah.
interacting. We're very pro-human here, and we are with all of you in the American Radicals podcast audience. Please don't turn us off.
share, share
I
with a
have
friend, actually.
I have a palate cleanse, but where do you want to take us today on your final thoughts, Garrett?
We're going to Ephesians 6 again, and verses 10 through 20. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand firm. Stand therefore, having fastened on the belt of truth, and having put on the breastplate of righteousness, and as shoes for your feet, having put on the readiness given by the gospel of peace. In all circumstances, take up the shield of faith with which you can extinguish all the flaming darts of the evil one. And take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, praying at all times in the Spirit with all prayer and supplication. To that end, keep alert with all perseverance, making supplication for all the saints, and also for me, that words may be given to me in opening my mouth boldly to proclaim the mystery of the gospel, for which I am an ambassador in chains, that I may declare it boldly as I ought to speak. And then I got another short clip here.
But nevertheless, Satan is a force to be reckoned with. And that is why it is critical to heed the instruction of this text. And so Paul reiterates the exhortation in verse 13, saying, therefore, take up the full armor of God so that you will be able to resist in the evil day, and having done everything, to stand firm. Paul is calling on us to be ready, to be prepared, to do all that is necessary to stand firm. And standing firm demands that we resist in the evil day. Where to resist is to resist power. And in this case, to resist demonic power. And the evil day is not just the day between the two comings of Christ. It is that, but it's not just that. The evil day refers to particularly evil days that arise in between those two comings. Times and seasons that are especially intense when the onslaught of the devil is heightened and increased. And I think we just experienced an evil day like that. And we may be on the heels of another one, or on our way into another one. An especially intense time of evil. And one that was undeniably devised by the rulers, the powers, the world forces of this darkness, and the spiritual forces of wickedness. In fact, you would have to be a complete fool to conclude otherwise. This is where the church needs to understand the substance and scope of the spiritual war. This goes well beyond spiritual warfare on a personal level. This goes well beyond spiritual warfare in the realm of false religion. This is spiritual warfare on a cosmic level. To get the entire world to walk in lockstep is an incredible feat. And the church had a glorious opportunity to stand firm, to refuse to yield up ground to the enemy, ground that rightfully belongs to Christ. But instead, she retreated. She put her lamp under a basket and removed herself from the vital means of grace. And all she had to do was what? Stand firm. Just be the church. And had she been the church in this season, what an opportunity for the honor and glory of Christ. And we saw the honor.
What he's talking about there is COVID. So I thought it was a good place to pull from that sermon again, because I think he's right when he says you would have to be an absolute fool to conclude otherwise. To get the world to march in lockstep. I think it really even ties into a lot of the topics we talked about today. Certainly that chart, that graph at the end that you played. We've got to pay attention. We've got to stand firm. We've got to be aware of the spiritual armor that we have, and we've got to use it, because if we don't, we're not going to be able to stand firm when the next evil day comes.
Standing firm is basically a suspendable sentiment. So today was about being anti-human. Let's palate cleanse with the very anti-suspendable game, which is where people do what they're told to do all the time, and that is Simon Says.
Simon says run, Simon says stop, Simon says run, Simon says stop, hands up, Simon says hands up, run in place, Simon says run in place. Simon says stop. Hands down. Hands down. Simon says hands down. Hands up. Hands up. Simon says hands up. Hands down. Simon says hands down. Run in place. Both did it. Simon says hands up. Simon says hands on head. Simon says hips. Simon says head. Simon says hips. Simon says head. Simon says hips. Simon says head. Simon says tap. Simon says stop. Simon says stop. Hands up. Hands up. Simon says hands up. Hands down. Hands down. Simon says hands down. They're good. Simon says lean forward. Simon says stand up straight. Simon says hands up. Simon says hands down. Hands up. Simon says hands up. Hands down. Simon says hands down. Run in place. Run in place. Simon says run. Simon says stop. Hands up. Simon says hands up. Wave it around. Wave it around. Simon says wave. Simon says stop. Wave it around. Wave it around. Simon says wave. Simon says run. Simon says stop. Hands down.
See, men and women are very different.
Oh, of course, there's a Simon Says competition. There's competitions for everything.
It's better than rock, paper, scissors, which there's actually an international coalition for. But maybe that's a story for another day. We're going to be done for today here on the American Radicals podcast, guys. If you haven't already, make sure you smash the thumbs up and give us a follow. And we'll be back with you on Thursday, 10:30 Eastern time here, rumble.com. Until then, guys, have a great day.
You've been listening to the voice of the Suspendables on the American Radicals podcast. Follow us on rumble.com/amradpod.